My name's Jill Rowe, and in this episode of The Different Podcast, I talk with Steve Chalke about how leadership is all about the granular and not the hype. We chat through where our model for what great leadership comes from and what it looks like in practice. And together we reflect on some of the trappings that those who find themselves carrying the responsibility of leadership might get caught up in. Things like power, privilege, and the temptation of perks. The reality of a Christ-centered approach to leadership is quite different. A revolution, in fact. A revolution that we believe the world really needs.
Hi, Jill.
Steve!
There you go. You normally start, and I start. There you go. I'm getting more confident. So I felt that I could go first.
I'm completely thrown. But...
Well, and there's a secret, right, that we're just about to tell you on. You always set the themes, don't you? I mean, you're the genius behind all this. You come up with it, and I just rock in and sit here and talk for a bit, and then away.
This is actually true.
I know. There you go. Honesty is the best policy. And you decided that we should call this session Leadership. It's about the granular, not the hype. So I can feel a lot of pain there.
Well, partly observation, partly experience. There's this thing, isn't there? Like leadership, everyone wants to be a leader. But ask a lot of leaders and they'll be like, don't do it. do you know? Because the reality of leadership is tough. It's not all the trappings but I think lots and lots of people are attracted to the idea of leadership, of being a leader, because they associate it with power, position, status, perks, which we don't have. And popularity. And I just don't think that that's it in any way, shape or form.
No. All that glitters isn't gold. From the outside, It looks wonderful. I always think that if somebody's not on a leadership team or not in the boardroom or not in the committee, if there's a room that they're not on the group that meets in that room, they imagine that in that room, magic happens. Big decisions are made that change the world. Have you noticed when people actually get on the leadership team or the board or the whatever it is or the committee that does this, they go, oh my life, this is so boring. Because it's grind, isn't it? Yeah. It's tough. It's crap half the time. Yeah. You wading through this stuff. And then you think, if I wasn't here, I could be out there doing something. So... yeah, I was wandering down the street the other day with someone. I always forget where I am when I have these conversations, and I'd just been to an Oasis project, and this guy had been there with me, and he said, "Oh, it was great to be at the project." He said, "But you probably don't feel that because you're here all the time." I said, "Well, I'm not here all the time, and it is great, and being with you today reminded me of why I do what I do, because you can forget why you're doing what you're doing because you're always in a room discussing it rather than doing it."
Absolutely,
and so to go and see something you're actually involved in, and the people you're working with or you're doing, is amazing, isn't it?
And the art of leadership is about trying to make things happen. It's about when two people have fallen out, helping them reconcile. It is about the tough, boring stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about, as was happening when I walked into this room, I was glued to a phone, saying nothing, just listening. And I'm just listening to someone's, in this case, anger. Their pain, that feeling they were bypassed. And you just got to soak it up and give them the space, because it's therapeutic, isn't it? To let that come out rather than land in there with a load of advice. Let them speak it out, which is a frustrating and hard thing to do in itself, because you want to say, but think of it like this and try that. But that is That's leadership. I think, well, in fact, just last weekend, I was talking to somebody, last weekend being yesterday. There you are. Give it away. It's Monday. and I was talking
Were
to
we at church?
I was talking to someone. I was talking to someone at church, and they asked me what I was going to do this week.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, and I went through all these things I'm going to do. Things I'm going to go to, things I've got to speak at. And then in the middle of the week, or towards the end of the week, I got to go to America. And I got to spend a few days in America. And they looked at me. And I could tell they were thinking, wow. And actually, it did sound very good. It really sounded very good.
What's called a sexy week, Steve.
Yeah. And then there's the other week. There's the other week that's happening at the same time, which is like the really difficult meetings I had this morning, and the things I've got to negotiate and navigate, and the lack of budget we've got to complete a project I'm on, and a new project we've got. And there's another one that I've got to raise £500,000 for to make happen, which will change people's lives. But I've got to raise it in the next 4, 5, 6 weeks. And can I do it? And is there another way? And if we don't do it, these great things won't happen. And the pressure of that is, so there's a kind of great week and a crap week, but they're
all
running
at the same time.
Yeah, every week. Which is the thing about leadership, isn't it? Somebody came to work with me a few years ago now, still does work with me, and they arrived, and this person sat down with me. They'd done other things in Oasis, and they arrived with me, and they sat down in this building actually, and they said, Steve, it's great to be working with you. At last, I'm working with a leader who knows what they're doing. And I was actually shocked. And I said to them, because it's true, I said, I've got some really bad news for you. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing half the time. And even when I do know what I should be doing, I can't do it because of all the other things I've got to do. So the week gets jammed up with stuff you have to do. And the priorities you end up doing really late at night or really early in the morning because... and it's all a muddle and sometimes you think you're just drowning in it.
Yeah. And
if you think I'm a leader who knows what they're doing, you got another thing coming. But that's normal. Yeah, actually, that's the thing, isn't it?
That is the thing. And there's that Native American proverb: "Never follow a leader who's more in love with power than people." I think that's such a smart saying, isn't it? And it's just interesting that model of leadership, the idea that people have of what leadership is, actually gets us nowhere. The reality of what leadership actually is, what you've just described, Steve, which is all about people and working with the complexity that brings and the challenge that brings. That's what we need, because that's service, isn't it? It's in the service of others. It's in service of a mission of change and bringing hope and transformation.
Yes, and it's painful. I often feel, I don't know whether I should say this, but I will say it, but judge me about it and say, Jill say to me, no, you shouldn't say that. But I often feel like acute, intense pain because I know that the things I should do are going to cost me so much, and it's so hard to do them and persist at it and let go of things that I'd really like to do otherwise. Does that sound bonkers or not?
No, I get it. I get it. And I see it in you as well. It's that quote, "The place God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet." And I know you've talked about it not being a gladness, but it is a deep, longing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a deep yearning to see that stuff.
Yes. I go running, and there's sometimes when I go running, when you go running, well, I don't know if everybody else, when I go running, I tend to think, I don't listen to podcasts very often or anything like that. I just run, and it gives me a chance to reflect and think. But sometimes... strange thing, although if I was, Gabor and Mate or somebody like that. I know why this happens, or the body keeps the score, you know, Van der Klok or someone. Sometimes I'm running and I'm thinking about issues and pressures that we've got, that I've got, that things I could say. And the pressure going on mentally becomes so huge, I can't run anymore. So I stop because I can't physically run, but I know actually I could physically run.
Yeah.
It's just that the agony of the issues we got to get through seems to crush me. So I stop and walk.
But you keep going, right?
Yeah. And then I get started running again. But
that's a metaphor for how it actually is, though, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's actually physically happens to me. It's the pain that you sometimes feel about situations you want to change and can't change.
What would you say are some trappings that some leaders fall into?
I think that to believe that leadership is a privilege is a trapping you can fall into. Of course, it is a privilege.
But it doesn't.
But it's a responsibility
privilege,
first.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a responsibility first. It's an obligation. It's an opportunity in the sense of being, I have been given this moment in which I can bring about change for others. I often get told off, you're probably one of those who tells me off, people say, like, I should do less, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And I know it's incurable in me and it's my own fault. But I kind of feel this deep thing. If you've been given the opportunity and you don't grasp the opportunity for the sake of others, then you are responsible. Do you know? I know, like, well, I was just talking, wasn't I, about these projects I can chase to raise this money. Yeah? I know if I raise that money, or if we raise that money, it will change people's lives. I know that they will not become addicts. I know that they will not live on benefits. I know that they will not get involved in crime. I know that they will contribute to society. I know that their future and their children's future and their grandchildren's future will be changed. And if I don't, then that won't happen. And you could say, oh, that's trying to turn yourself into a messiah. It's not. It's just to know that we all have responsibilities for one another. And that burden is huge. Please write to me and tell me how bonkers I am if you're listening, and why I need to get my life sorted out and see a psychiatrist.
So believing in leadership as, well, I'm privileged, rather than seeing the responsibility as a trapping. I wonder as well if believing that leadership is an easy path is a trapping, that you can kid yourself. Well, this should just happen because after all, I'm the leader. Yeah. So I just tell people what to do.
Fortunately for me,
it's never been that.
No, fortunately for me, I was going to say I'm a Christian. Like you can make that like at any level. But what I mean by that is, I have chosen to follow a man who was crucified for what he did, what he believed. And, you know, I often think, you know, when I'm kind of in my complaining mood internally, oh, why have I got this bad deal? Why didn't people acknowledge me? Why don't I ever get any credit for this? Well, you know how you get inside. And then I remind myself, but it sometimes takes me a long time to get around to it, I have actually chosen to follow someone who called me to love people and told me to take the blow and not return it, to suck it up, to keep going, to spend myself, and who took his own medicine and gave his life, was crucified by people who didn't understand, persecuted and executed by people who didn't understand, who couldn't see it, who wanted to get their own back, and prayed, forgive them. So that's the pretty high bar there.
It's a very high bar, and it suggests, doesn't it, that to be a leader, there is a character that we are wise to develop. You know, it's our friend Brian McLaren who said you can't take an epidural shot to ease the pain of giving birth to character. And I think there's something, isn't there, in well, there's definitely truth in that, but in terms of the character of a leader, like, what would, for you, Steve, what would you like? What does that need to look like?
Well, I suppose you're molded, aren't you? You can never see yourself, but you can see others. So I can see how other people whom I respect and appreciate have been molded in the crucible of pain and pressure. It's shaped them like a crushed piece of coal becomes a diamond.
Yeah, exactly.
And everyone wants to be a diamond, but no one wants the pressure, you know. Yeah. And you can see how beauty emerges from pain.
Yeah.
But then you don't want pain to be born into people's lives, do you? You don't want that. It's a dichotomy, isn't it? It's
maybe it's about recognizing that, being curious about, you know, about the pressure, about how you shape up under the pressure, because some pressure can make people worse, right? Some,
yes,
yeah, just like,
and that's why I say you don't want that for people, and you're not diagnosing that or recommending. No. You know, go and get yourself some pressure in life, suck some stuff up. You know, allow people to kick you around a bit. That'd do you good. Yeah. So it's not that, is it? No. And yet, through the struggle, beauty is born.
Yeah, but you choose. We all have a choice. We all have agency about the direction in which we want our growth to go in, don't we? So I can allow this pressure to take me in one direction, or I can choose the other direction, which is towards compassion and generosity and gentleness and tenderness and connection and belonging. Or it can take me to anger and resentment and fury. And so it's really important in that granular graft of being a leader that we are also thinking about, who am I and who am I becoming in this pressure and in this struggle, which is just a part of being a leader.
Yeah. If only you could get, as you say, as a Brian McLaren's quote is smart, isn't it? Yeah. It's like, if only you could take tablets for character. You know, you could kind of like, you know, just
I'd be out of work.
A dose a day, and you know, instead of a vitamin D tablet or whatever, I'll have a humility tablet, and I'll have a courage tablet, and I'll get a kind of, and then you just get these things automatically, but you can't get it in a bottle.
No, and so that, you know, you think of someone like Nelson Mandela. He talked in his book, didn't he, and in interviews about he was formed when he was breaking rocks in the bright light where they wouldn't give them sunglasses to wear, you know, and that's why his eyes were so damaged, because he was in the, you know, the limestone quarry. And like his character, his ability to forgive was forged in that space. Yeah. Not when he became president. No. Like he developed to be the president he was in that struggle, and he chose in the quarry, and he chose forgiveness, not holding grudges, not anger, and it's 27 years, you know.
An extraordinary thing. Have you ever been to Robben Island?
Yeah, I have. Very powerful.
An extraordinary thing. I because Oasis works in South Africa, I've been there a lot, and one time I went to Robben Island, and then I think on the same trip, I'm not absolutely sure, but on a trip thereabouts, I went to Pretoria, and I was asked to speak at the university.
I was there,
and it was an extraordinary thing, and I thought I was going to be speaking to a bunch of undergraduates, but when I got there, it was the faculty. Yeah. It was the theology faculty and the ethics faculty and the psychology gang and all this kind of stuff. Like that. And anyway, and they wanted me to talk about the inclusion of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people, LGBT plus. And talk about an ethic around all of that and a theology around all of it. So I gave this talk. I'd not written a paper because I didn't know. Even when I was on the way there, I thought I was talking to a bunch of undergraduates. It wasn't until I was in the car that somebody said, "Oh, it's the faculty." And anyway, I get this talk. But I'll never forget that, because then afterwards there was however long I talked for, then there was time of questions. Lots of people asked questions, and there were a whole number of professors there, and some were really antagonistic towards LGBT people and antagonistic towards me because I was supportive of them. And some of those were black leaders. And then at the end, this little old guy stood up. He had a beret, I remember. And it was obvious that he was held in high honour by everybody. I guess he was retired, but he'd been part of the faculty. And when he spoke, everybody was hushed and listened. And I realised this was a man that they had respect for. And he said, Steve, perhaps he said Mr. Chalke, I can't remember, but he said, thank you for coming and thank you for speaking to us. He said, you have noted from the responses and questions to what you've said that those of us who've so recently known liberty find it hard to pass that liberty on to others.
So
forgive us.
Yeah.
And that was the end. Nobody else spoke.
That was that. Yeah.
And then afterwards, I was told by the guy who taken me there that guy had spent all those years on Robben Island with Nelson Mandela.
Wow.
It's a strange thing, isn't it? That some people learn through their hardship, your point, to extend generosity.
Yeah.
And others seem to only learn the opposite. They close down instead of open up.
Yeah. And so maybe, Steve, if anyone ever finds themselves in a position which feels like leadership, I think it must be so important to have that mental model in your head of, well, what kind of leader do I want to be, and who am I going to base my way of leading on? And you mentioned like the Jesus story, the Jesus example. How does that show up in any other ways for you?
I think that a leader is a servant. And if you remember that, and you remember, I'm talking to myself, I'm not trying to swing this on anybody else. You know, this isn't me preaching except to me. I know that I am privileged in that I have the opportunity to lead, but leadership is fundamentally, first, foremost, and in the last word, about servanthood. That's what it is. You're serving other people. And I also know that it's temporary. It's passing. We're all passing, actually. You know, we're a long time dead, as people say. You know, we are. So it's about building a legacy, isn't it? It's no point in trying to build yourself. You're here today, gone tomorrow. So it's what you're passing on. I think that I'm always interested in, you know, a new government comes in and they appoint ministers, and then it's the Prime Minister that does it. And the word minister, I am a Baptist minister, it doesn't mean leader.
No.
Minister, if you look it up in any dictionary, it means servant. So I am a servant. That's what I was called to. I'm still a Baptist minister. That's what I am is in my title, if I ever use it. I am a servant. But when you say I'm the Minister of State for, you're saying I'm the servant of everyone. And when you say I'm the Prime Minister, you're saying I am the chief servant. Yeah. And then we talk about people being in power. Yeah. And there's a dichotomy there, isn't there? There's a juxtaposition.
Absolutely.
It just doesn't fit together. No. Why don't we say I'm the Prime Minister and I'm in service? I'm not trying to. Or why don't we say about the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's in service? It's not normally the Prime Minister that says I'm in power. It's the people that say he's in power or she's in power or they're in power. Yeah. Why don't we say they're in service?
Yeah, that's so clear. It's as though we've adopted an Aristotelian view rather than a Christ view of leadership.
Leadership is power, it's use,
Yeah.
throwing people around, winning wars, whereas Christ-centered version of this is the exact opposite. It's give yourself instead of take.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. It's the challenge I live with, and some days I feel like I'm doing okay at it, and other days I know I'm really messing it up. And
it's in the granular, not the hype.
And we all save our worst behaviour for indoors.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Jill.